Speaker Mike Johnson is facing a possible revolt in the Republican caucus. And meanwhile, he charges ahead, moving with funding for Ukraine before the border security bill. We're going to talk about that. Plus, Joe Biden thought his uncle was eaten by cannibals. And spoiler alert, he wasn't. We'll discuss those details. And the jury selection process in the Trump trial has taken a turn for, well, what we expected it would take a turn for. And he is taking Manhattan by storm. And is this finally the end of NPR as we know it, at least taxpayer funding for NPR? We're going to explore all those issues and more with our brand new Larry Roundtable discussion. Joining us for the conversation this week, Andy Mangione, Senior Vice President of AMAC Action, Kurt Schlichter, host of the Kurt Schlichter Show podcast, and senior columnist at Town Hall, Kurt Schlichter. Those guys are joining us right now. We're brought to you by the Electronic Payments Coalition and AMAC. I'm Larry O'Connor, and this is the Roundtable. Speaker Mike Johnson started the week with a vote of no confidence from parts of his caucus, and he went ahead and took a bill to the floor having to do with funding Ukraine, funding Israel, and funding defense for Taiwan without bringing anything to the floor about border security. This is in direct opposition to what he promised when he became speaker. When asked about this, he spoke pretty strongly about what he's decided about Ukraine. Here he is earlier this week.
I'm doing here what I believe to be the right thing. I think providing lethal aid to Ukraine right now is critically important. I really do. I really do believe the intel and the briefings that we've gotten that I believe Xi and Vladimir Putin and Iran really are an axis of evil. I think they're in coordination on this. I think that Vladimir Putin would continue to march through Europe if he were allowed. I think he might go to the Balkans next. I think he might have a showdown with Poland or one of our NATO allies. To put it bluntly, I would rather send bullets to Ukraine than American boys.
Chrisdegaulle, let's start with you here, Chris, because we've seen this story over and over again. It was pretty clear that Speaker Johnson promised that he would not bring any of these bills to the floor unless border security was dealt with first. So what happened here?
I asked that question rhetorically on the show this week. I said, what happens to these guys when they ascend to power? I told my audience when Mike Johnson became speaker, I said, listen, guys, I don't know. It could be a big ruse, but everything on paper says he's a conservative. He's one of us, Freedom Caucus guy. Let's give him a shot. And then lo and behold, he turns into anybody else we've ever seen in that position. And I guess you have to wonder what happens behind closed doors. Is it an intel community thing where they muscle their way into these people's minds? I guess he's a sincerely held beliefs guy, but I have two stories in front of me today from Axios. Democrats' case for saving Mike Johnson, and House Democrats take unprecedented step to save Mike Johnson's foreign aid package. So that's all I need to know. He and Democrats seem to be working together more so than his own party, and that's a sign of bad things to come. That's a harbinger of things to come to me.
And Andy, the way this conversation seems to go for some reason is if you say, listen, let's focus on our border first, then maybe we can fund Ukraine, then we can do these other things. Suddenly you're, on Putin's side, or you're on the Iranian side or Hamas's side. Is it difficult for people to understand here why they can't just say, sure, we'll fund Ukraine. Let's have that conversation. Let's have the vote. But let's make the border the priority. That's what we're not understanding.
Exactly. And, from an AMAC perspective, our members are extremely concerned about immigration and the border. And I think they could probably tolerate anything as long as our border is shored up. They're extremely concerned about the fentanyl and everything that's flowing across the border. They're extremely concerned about these illegal immigrants that are sopping up all of our services in hospitals and in schools. And I really think that we polled our members on this issue before. They're a forgiving bunch, and they realize that the speaker's in a tough position. They realize that he's a man of faith. They're realizing that he's dealing with a complex structure of the House. But in the mind of an AMAG member, it starts and ends with border security. So it's tough for them to swallow when the speaker says one thing and then does another.
Kurt, this is also, by the way, in the middle of a presidential election year where I would think it's important for Republicans to sort of communicate what their priorities are, what they stand for, and what differentiates themselves from Democrats. This has all of the makings of being able to be a winner for Republicans.
Oh, look, I don't know any hardcore Republicans for whom the borscht guzzling Slavs are a priority over the border. Look, I like the Ukrainians. I trained them 4 times. I served with them overseas. They're in the right. I would like them to beat the Russians. I would also like a pony. There simply aren't enough Ukrainians. And this is, putting aside the whole, I told you X, but I'm going to do Y. I don't know what the outcome is here. What does Speaker Johnson expect to achieve at the end of this paying for a bunch of Ukrainian pensions? Because it's not just lethal aid. It's pensions and social programs and all sorts of crap. What is the end state this money will achieve? And of course, the answer is, shut up, you love Putin, you're probably also a transphobe.
Well, I'll tell you, Majority Leader Steve Scalise appeared on Salem News Channel's weekly show this week on the Hill. And when asked about this and about the conflict right now within the Republican caucus, he spun the question right back to, hey, we can all agree on supporting Israel, can't we?
There's some tough issues. There's some issues where we're divided, but most of the issues were very, very united. Look, this past week, we had a whole host of bills that I brought to the floor for our members to vote on that dealt with not only standing with Israel, but standing up to Iran, putting sanctions on Iran and all of their proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, who are shooting and firing weapons at our men and women in uniform. This is an example of where if the president's not going to lead, Congress is leading. And we saw overwhelming votes, and it was very uniting for Republicans, but we even pulled in a number of Democrats.
Andy, it's true. Most Americans do unite behind Israel, and it isn't something that the Biden administration has been clear on. But is it enough to just sort of change the subject and say, never mind our promises about the border, we got to rally behind Israel? We want to rally behind Israel, 100%, but we can't forget the border. I don't know what they're trying to accomplish here.
It seems to be a lot of deflection going on here. I hope that they realize how bad these optics are among the GOP on Capitol Hill and what it looks like to the rest of the country, how just discombobulated they've been. With regard to Israel, of course, Israel is our biggest ally in the Middle East, the largest democracy there, and they need to be defended. But in the same breath, we're the last best hope of freedom on the face of the planet. Why can't we secure our border? How hard can that be? And why can't we do both?
And Chris, I mean, you're in the middle of the country there. I think that you reflect Midwestern values and some votes that both Republicans and Democrats are going to be vying for this November. It's a political winner, isn't it? That's what I'm not understanding. Where's the loser in all of this for Republicans to die on the hill of border security?
Well, and Pennsylvania's John Fetterman. I mean, this is a guy who lately has sounded more like a populist. He, for heaven's sakes, has been one of the toughest on the border, saying the population of Pittsburgh is pouring across just about every month. So even he's calling an alarm about this. Supporting Israel is easier to me and clearer because, number one, they've got the stuff to get it done. I mean, we can all agree supporting Israel is easier because Israel can actually, if you let them, take it to Iran and secure victory on their own. There is no clear objective, as Kurt said, in Ukraine. So endlessly handing them money. I talked to Missouri Senator Eric Schmidt recently. He said, I've been in this town, Washington, D.C., 17 months. And Chris, there's this bizarre obsession of everyone to keep sending money to Ukraine. And I genuinely don't understand it. That's what he told me.
Yeah.
And yet something as easy to understand as the border seems difficult to get to. Doesn't make sense.
Kurt, you're a retired Army colonel, and both Scalise and Speaker Johnson have raised the specter of, well, if Putin moves on a NATO country, then we have to commit our troops, so better to commit money. I understand the logic of that argument, but it seems kind of blackmail-y to me.
Well, it's also stupid. First of all, let me touch base on Israel. There was no promise to add border security to Israel, and the Republicans are not divided about Israel. Republicans are divided about Ukraine. So see, in a negotiation, you give something to get something. And Speaker Johnson doesn't seem to understand that. Now, you know very well I have a very nice car. That's because I don't give away the store every time I negotiate, so people hire me again. A problem I don't think Mike Johnson's going to have if, through some miracle, we manage to hold on to the House next year. As for invading Western Europe, that triggers Article 5. That triggers NATO. That triggers an American response. Putin is having enough trouble dealing with the Ukrainians. He thinks he's going to take on the combined forces of NATO. I find that hard to believe. And again, I was a guy who was in the Cold War. I was in Stuttgart waiting for the Russian hordes to come. So I kind of understand the situation, and I'm not buying it.
Kurt, you raised the specter as to whether Mike Johnson keeps the gavel here. There is the motion to vacate, but it's not being acted upon yet. Tom Massey or Marjorie Taylor Greene can call it at any time. Let's go around the horn here. And again, I want to preface this by saying I like Congressman Johnson. I'm not so sure about Speaker Johnson at this time, but I do like Congressman Johnson. I wish the two weren't so different. Do you think he survives through Election Day, Kurt?
Probably. I give it like a 60% chance, only because another speaker fight would be so disruptive. I'd like to throw out a big thank you to Matt Gaetz right now for putting us in this position. I have a lot of problems with McCarthy, but McCarthy's not dumb enough to get into this exact situation. So great job, Matt Gaetz, and the rest of you knuckleheads for throwing him out.
I always worry about whether Kurt's going to really share his opinion about how he really feels about these things.
If you want me to talk about Matt Gaetz, we're going to need to go off FCC compliance.
Andy, what do you think? Does Johnson keep the gavel through the year?
I'm going to agree with Kurt because I think that who else would want this job based on what's gone on in recent months? We polled our members on this, and they were extremely evenly divided in opposing the removal of McCarthy or supporting the removal of McCarthy. But anymore, this is one of the toughest jobs on the face of the planet. And are they going to find somebody in the GOP and Congress that would even want to do it?
Chris?
Yeah, the problem, I agree. I don't think he'll go anywhere. But the problem is I keep hearing Republicans say, we got to govern. We can't get anything done. And I don't feel like most conservatives are in the mood for them to do much of anything. I think we're just fine that they're not doing much. So Mike Johnson being there or not being there, I mean, yes, I'd like a secure border, but they seem to be doing everything else but. So Congress doing nothing, quite frankly, makes me happy.
All right, up next, Trump takes Manhattan as the roundtable continues. As we draw near to another critical election, it's not only about casting your vote, it's about elevating your voice. As AMAC's membership grows, Washington listens. If you love America, visit amac.us/Salem to become a 4-year member for just $30. Membership gives you access to the AMAC magazine, money-saving discounts, trusted news, sweepstakes, and a whole lot more. By joining the over 2 million members, they can't ignore your voice. Join now at amac.us/Salem. That's amac.us/Salem. Earlier this week, the trial of Donald Trump in Manhattan began with jury selection process. The jurors were seated by yesterday, and then, well, 2 of those seats became suddenly vacated. Why? Well, Fox News reported on it. Take a look.
That this has to do with something that very well could have been the fact that this juror may have been arrested back in the 1990s conducting some type of political vandalism against something, posters on the right, and it was not revealed, or he did not remember it and did not include it, and that is why that juror has been dismissed.
Well, I mean, of course it slipped his mind. Who among us can remember how many times we got arrested back in the 90s for vandalizing and defacing political posters? It was the 90s, after all. Kurt, you're a lawyer. Should this have been discovered during voir dire, or is this just what Manhattan is going to give you with a jury pool?
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I will note that if he's lied under oath and forgot to mention this salient fact, he'd be guilty of perjury because, of course, you swear to tell the truth during voir dire. He won't be prosecuted because the only person prosecuted in New York is Donald Trump, and then only for made-up baloney crimes. So, this is just. I don't understand why people come to me and say, Kurt, as a lawyer, what do you think of this? Because this has nothing to do with the law. It's a joke. It's a frame job. It's a kangaroo court. It's a railroad. It's so deeply ridiculous and so deeply damaging to our country that I just have to sit back and laugh. And I don't think it's going to affect anything. I don't think there's anybody out there who goes, well, Donald Trump's guilty of whatever the hell this is supposed to be. I guess I'll have to vote for the corrupt, desiccated pervert who showered with his daughter.
Andy, I'm curious about the membership at AMAC, though, because I think that this trial is meant to sway people like the members of AMAC because they're going to see headlines about hush money and porn stars. But there is a fundamental lack of fairness here when you look at what these charges are and how they came about, or are they looking beyond those headlines?
Absolutely. I think our members can see exactly what this is. They know a frame job and a railroading when they see it. Our members are very informed on the issues, and they're very informed on what's happening to Donald Trump. They're very concerned about what's happening to our judicial system and how it's being just degraded based on these activities by these activist judges. And I find it amazing that only 2 jurors were dismissed in Manhattan with regard to that. I'm surprised it's not more, but rest assured, the antics that are going on and what they're putting former President Trump through, it's not being lost on our members with regard to how unfairly he's being treated.
Chris, Michael Avenatti, of all people, said that this wasn't a fair trial. He said, of course, they'll get a conviction. It's Manhattan. But ask yourself, would they get a conviction if we're in Alabama or in your state of Missouri? That does tell you everything, right? It depends on where you're bringing these charges.
That's right. And I think what Kurt was describing as probably not having much impact in terms of public sentiment is right. I will give you an example. I'm in church last weekend, and a woman approaches and she says, Chris, I just don't understand this court case against Trump. And I said, yeah, it's a tough one. She said, and this was interesting. She said, I can't believe that judge isn't going to let the president go to his son's graduation. And that struck me because she heard that. People heard that. This judge is a nasty human being. I mean, this now, that move, it's like this is just a bridge too far. They've gone so far. I think they've actually made Trump a sympathetic figure, which is a tough thing to do, but I think these people have managed to do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Andy, that you're surprised that only 2 jurors have gotten dismissed. The other juror actually was very honest. She said that after her family and friends found out she was on the jury, they were inundating her with text messages and information derogatory to Donald Trump. And she said, I don't think I can be impartial with all of this coming at me. How many of these jurors didn't say that? And take a look at this. It's a graphic from Fox News Channel. Juror number 2, who is still on the jury, gentlemen, a nurse, Upper East Side, no kids, no husband, gets news from New York Times, Google, and CNN, and has no opinion on Trump. She should be removed for not having an opinion on Trump. Who in this world does not have an opinion on Donald Trump, Chris?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Someone said, I would have said Terry Schiavo when they allowed her to live, but other than that, I don't have an answer.
It's true, though. But Kurt, I mean, honestly, anybody who is being questioned by a lawyer that says, I really don't have strong feelings about Donald Trump is obviously lying. Everyone has strong feelings about Donald Trump.
But look, they're lying to get on the jury to convict him. Why do we even? This isn't even subject to debate. They want to get on and convict him of something. It doesn't matter what. Yeah. Juror number 2 is clearly always going to vote against Donald Trump. You know it. I know it. This case never should have been brought. If it was brought, it shouldn't have been held in Manhattan. It shouldn't be held with this corrupt judge because he's obviously biased. He should have recused himself. I mean, the whole thing's a joke. And it's going to get thrown out on appeal. It's something. It's going to get fixed. They'll get thrown out
after the election, of course.
Well, of course.
Andy, by the way,
I don't think it's going to matter.
The Babylon Bee actually has an image of this juror number 2 in question. You might want to take a look at this here. It's shocking. I had no idea that juror number 2 looked like that. again, this is leave it to the B, right? This is a question of basic unfairness. And I guess the question is, Andy, will this end up helping Donald Trump in the long run? Will this be a boomerang once again, hitting the left and the Democrats in the face?
Absolutely. You know, if you're, in my personal opinion, he's going to raise money off of this. They are going to turn him into a sympathetic figure if they haven't already. I think this blows up like every other attempt they've tried to do, or most every other attempt they've tried to damage him. He's going to walk away from this thing regardless of the outcome. And I still think that he'll be held very favorably in the opinion of people that want to vote for him.
Well, even more than that, Chris Stigall, you mentioned the fact that the judge won't let him leave the trial to see his son's graduation. Some genius, and I don't always say this about the Trump campaign team, but some genius decided, listen, we can't leave New York. Let's just campaign in Manhattan. He goes up to Harlem, visits the bodega owned by the guy who got prosecuted by Alvin Bragg for defending himself from thieves. And suddenly, on the streets of Harlem, a campaign rally breaks out.
I love you, Trump! I love you, Trump! We love Trump! I love you, Trump! We love 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 Trump!
Yeah, this is something that Tim Murtaugh, our friend and former communications director of the Trump campaign back in 2020, he said this was, what do you call it, permissive campaigning or permission campaigning? These people who are brown and black-skinned cheering Trump, hugging Trump. Same thing happened down there at the Chick-fil-A in Atlanta. He says this is very powerful because this is sending an image to a lot of these groups that are told. In fact, there was the young lady that was down in Atlanta. She said, you know, they tell us that we're not supposed to like you. I'm told, don't believe them. You know, we love you, Trump. He said, come over here and got a hug. These are images that are being beamed all over the place right now to people of all colors. And I think it's tearing down this facade that unless you're white, you don't like Trump.
Yeah.
These were two powerful wins in the last week for him that way.
Yeah, children in Harlem screaming, "We love you, Trump." You can't buy that kind of political moment. And Andy, Lee Zeldin, former congressman from New York, actually said if he keeps campaigning in New York, he could put that state in play. I don't know about that, but because it's in New York, there are TV news cameras there all the time, so it gets beamed everywhere, as Chris just said. This actually could be very effective for his campaign.
Without a doubt, and Lee would know something about turning the state of New York or coming close to turning the state of New York. It would be wonderful to see New York in play. I don't think it's going to happen, but with all that's going on in New York, with all the cameras that are there, with the Bodega Love Fest that's going on there, which was wonderful to see. It would be wonderful to see if New York could be competitive in November of this year.
May I jump in and add, Larry, to that Donald Trump just announced May 11th, he's going to do another rally in South Jersey.
Well, isn't that right across the river from Pennsylvania?
It sure is, but no sitting Republican president had gone to New Jersey, and he did for, of course, Jeff Van Drew, who flipped parties, but he's doing it again, I guess ostensibly for him, but that's pretty rare to spend time. Of course, I guess he can't leave the court too, but just as Andy said, you've got the New York potential, I guess, maybe, and New Jersey potential. At least it seems like he's playing for them, I guess is the point.
Let's go around the horn real fast here, Kurt. They're counting on a poll. There's a lot of polling out there that shows that Trump's support starts to wane if he is convicted of a felony. But see, that's a hypothetical, and I'm always suspicious of polling on a hypothetical. You believe he will get convicted because you said it'll get overturned. Do you think it does have the damage that they're hoping for?
No, and I look back to the Access Hollywood thing, and remember that came out, and all the little people, I'll never vote for that guy, and then they freaking did.
Yeah.
I think that this will get priced in with Trump. The appeal will be going, and we will have footage of Trump. If I was Trump, every single day I'd go to an ethnic neighborhood and be swarmed by people who love me every single day.
Andy, does a conviction hurt Trump?
I don't think so. I think this guy is beginning to remind me of having a coat of Teflon on him. I think that they're going to continue to try and hurt him, but I think he's going to emerge from this, regardless of the outcome, stronger.
All right, Chris?
Yeah, if the American public thought they had an option that was squeaky clean, maybe, but 3 words, Hunter Biden laptop.
Yeah, I've been saying it for a while now. I'd love to vote for the reincarnation of Ronald Reagan or George Washington, but that ship has sailed. This is our choice. Choose right, choose wisely. Coming up, is NPR finally done for? And is it suicide? We'll get to that next. Millions of Americans earn and use credit card rewards. The corporate mega stores, they want to take those rewards away. Rewards we use on groceries and school supplies, cash back that we use to save money on gas and to grow our small businesses, and of course, airline miles that we use to visit loved ones and to make cherished memories. The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill would eliminate credit card rewards. No more travel miles, no more cash back, no more hotel rewards points, all gone. When lawmakers help corporate megastores line their pockets, American families pay for it. So please tell your senator to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. Visit handsoffmyrewards.com to get more information about this bill so that you can be an informed voter and then take action. The tools are right there to let your senator know that it's time to stop the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. Go to handsoffmyrewards.com. That's handsoffmyrewards.com.
We kind of locked down after a while. I think after a while we started covering Trump in a way that like a lot of legacy news organizations, that we were trying to damage his presidency, to even find anything we could to harm him. And I think what we latched on to was Russia collusion, like a lot of news organizations, which was, as I write, sort of catnip, although it was just rumors and a lot of it based on pretty shoddy documents or evidence. It wasn't really solid, but I think it was compelling. And for us, I think a lot of newspapers, use documents or anonymous sources. We really latched on to Adam Schiff. He was like our muse to the Trump collusion story. We had him on constantly, a lot. I think I counted 25 times. And in most of those conversations, he sort of alluded to evidence he may have had or sort of teased out, Russia, he was colluding, or the campaign was colluding with Russia. And then the Mueller report came out and no collusion. And, I think we sort of the story kind of disappeared. But to me, that was like a time for what went wrong? Why did we miss this? Despite our feelings about Trump, this is a story we should have sort of treated differently.
That is Yuri Berliner. He is the former editor, business editor at NPR, had worked there for 25 years, man of the left, total liberal. He was suspended without pay by NPR for blowing the whistle with Barry Weiss, as you just saw, and then he eventually resigned. Well, gentlemen, is this the beginning of potentially finally defunding NPR? Everything he just described, you could say about every major news agency in this country. CNN, MSNBC, the networks, Washington Post, New York Times, all of it, Adam Schiff, across the board. The difference is, Kurt, we're forced to pay for this with our tax dollars. Why in the hell should my money go to that garbage?
Well, I expect to see Mike Johnson come up to a microphone and explain that the intelligence community is demonstrating that it is essential that we have some communist wine woman with delusions of coherence running government media, and anybody who doesn't agree with it is a tool of Putin. Of course, we should defund it, and every other of these propaganda organizations. Whether Mike Johnson has a testicular fortitude to pull that off is another issue. But I think it's going to become very hard for Republicans, even the softest of Republicans, to make the case that this fascist organization should be the subject of our largesse.
Andy, every time Republicans have tried to defund public broadcasting, they're accused of killing Big Bird, which, by the way, I'm fine with that. You should see the droppings around my house. I don't need the Big Bird around here. Is it going to work this time? This is a political no-brainer, isn't it? This is the perfect time to pull funding.
This is what's known as a softball, and if Republicans have their act together, they can hit it out of the park. And I hope that they do. NPR for far too long, and along with other entities that are publicly funded, have been nothing more than a propaganda piece for the DNC. It's about time they've been exposed. These are the receipts. These are the receipts that people have been looking for, particularly Republicans in Congress. Now let's see if they have the stomach to follow through.
Chris, I'm sure you followed this story. I found it interesting. I think Mr. Berliner's story, his essay, and this podcast with Barry Weiss at the Free Press was very fascinating. He said he thinks everything changed. I was looking at this. I'm like, it's NPR. Of course. We've all known this for about 40 years. He said, oh, no. Everything changed after Trump was elected. That's when things got bad. You buying that?
No, not really, but I think it was on steroids for sure. I actually, full disclosure, my very first job in broadcasting was on an NPR affiliate. I anchored the local morning news and had to anchor the rest of the network day. And even as a kid, before I really understood politics, it always sounded ridiculous and pretentious. I've grown to call it the wood floor and fern crowd that listens to it. Dissonant flutes and everybody who has a tote bag, thinks they're smarter because it's all said in a whisper. It's pretentious. It's always been pretentious and leftist and haughty. It's the kind of thing you associated with John Kerry back in the day. Of course, they've always had a political point of view, but yeah, was it ratcheted up to a 10, a new level of hysteria with Trump? I don't doubt it. And when you hear the words of that CEO, I've forgotten her name now. Marr, I think.
Kelly Marr.
Kelly Marr. In fact, let's go to it right now. You mentioned it, and I've got it teed up. Here she was giving a TED Talk. By the way, I think anyone who gives a TED Talk should be immediately banned from any government job or any high position. She's giving a TED Talk. This is back when she worked for Wikimedia, which is the nonprofit organization that runs Wikipedia. And here she goes.
That perhaps for our most tricky disagreements, seeking the truth and seeking to convince others of the truth might not be the right place to start. In fact, our reverence for the truth might be a distraction that's getting in the way of finding common ground and getting things done.
Wow. Thank you, Madam Orwell. Chris, you've got to have a PhD in something to agree with that sentiment, especially when you're in charge of a media organization.
Yeah, she continued to go on about how, my truth and their truth, that's that Oprah thing that, well, there's the truth and then there's your truth and there's my truth. And we're always so obsessed with pursuing the truth that maybe, it's anti-intellectualism is what it is. I mean, it's not profound. It's not smart. It's the antithesis of honest and intellectual. The truth it just is. There is no my truth, your truth. Let's set aside the truth and try to come and And anybody that doesn't see it that way as a journalist, good grief. What's journalism then?
Andy, this is part of the problem here where everybody is sort of in this strange cycle of not really knowing what news organizations to trust. And by the way, this has always been the rationale for why we need an NPR, because it's just down the middle. Now, this is the woman who's in charge of NPR who thinks truth gets in the way of things.
Truth gets in the way of things, according to her. The pesky freedom of speech. Boy, what a big problem with that. Anybody that did not go to an elite university, an alleged elite university, can see right through this woman's nonsense. What she said, I mean, I think we're all dumber for having heard that than what we've heard before. I'm aghast at how she, with a straight face, can say that truth gets in the way.
Right. But here's the thing. She represents every single college campus in America right now. This is every professor and every dean and every university
with one exception. She's white.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Kurt Schlichter.
Super white.
She is.
I mean, she is the most white wine woman of whiteness who ever whited.
Kurt, developing this morning, Chris Rufo, the independent journalist who's been revealing all of this about Ms. Maher, Catherine Maher, the new CEO of NPR, he interviewed the gentleman who founded Wikipedia, who used to hire this person. I want to read part of this interview here. Mr. Sanger says, she actually comes out against the system for being free and open when she says that she's worked with government to shut down what they consider misinformation. That in and itself means that it's no longer free and open. He also says, I think it has to be the case that the Wikimedia Foundation now, probably governments, probably the CIA, have accounts that they control in which they actually exert their influence. This, Kurt, is a brand new frontier, I think, for so many of us who thought that the internet was going to be part and parcel to more news, more voices, more information, as our mentor Andrew Breitbart championed. But instead, she's sitting in the back pocket of the CIA, helping funnel fake information through websites and now through NPR. This is can this ever get fixed?
Yeah, well, it can, but look, the left was never in favor of free speech. The left used free speech when it didn't have power, and as soon as it got power, it turned against it, as we all knew it would. Andrew wasn't fooled by these people. He knew exactly what they were. It's just, look, when somebody like Kelly Mara gets revealed, it's not stunning to any of us or most of your audience. It's stunning to normal people. When she says, well, free speech is a Western construct that undermines the intentionality of blah, 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 blah. And starts that jargon. Normal people are like, what the hell are you talking about? This is all for normal people. We knew what these bastards were from the beginning. And they're bastards.
Back to the House of Representatives. Republicans can move to defund NPR as a standalone bill today. They can vote on it. They can pass it. And I know they keep saying, well, the Senate will never pass it. Seems to me, Andy, that if Republicans say we shouldn't be paying tax dollars on this stuff, and if senators block it, then every single Democrat senator running for re-election needs to explain it back in their state. Seems to me that's a political win either way. You either get the senators to jump on board and defund NPR, or you put them on defensive this November. Why aren't they doing it?
That's a good question. Put them on the record. I think that there's a lot of people on Capitol Hill that lack the political will to do this. What's at risk here? All right, we've stated the obvious with NPR. We know that they're a propaganda arm of the DNC and have been for decades. This is obvious to regular people, other than those people that listen to NPR, but they're not regular people, okay? Yeah. I think it's a lack of political will, a lack of guts. This is a no-brainer. And it really, how much political capital is going to cost somebody for voting for something like this, to put it in front of the Senate, to get these Democrats on the record?
Chris Stigall, when public broadcasting began, there were 3 networks, and that was it. And now look at where we are in terms of television broadcasting. With radio, we have 8-year-olds that have podcasts right now. We have convicted felons in jail who can have a podcast with their smartphone. Why are we funding spoken word radio? It's not like our industry and our market does not have a flood of spoken word content.
That's exactly right. I was going to say, we've never had access to more opinions, more thoughts, more shows, more content than we do right now. Everyone in the world, your neighbor, your friend, your sister, your cousin, they're all content creators now. We've never had more. And so isn't it interesting that the two entities that Washington and the left want to control is the internet, which, the social media sites. Section 230, I think, is part of this discussion, right? It's hey, we'll let you guys off the hook. Nobody can touch you from a legal perspective, but the deal is you're going to work in concert with us so that we can control the content. And similarly, NPR, same deal. It's this kind of fascistic model in a way, in my opinion. And I think the Republicans are guilty of this too. They like ultimately that government's sort of in bed with these folks. Obama always lamented there used to be a common set of facts. Well, this is how they control that common set of facts, is they get all these folks together that they protect and fund on the taxpayers' backs. And that's how they square that common set of facts and then tell everybody else that we're nuts and kooks and conspiracy theorists.
And not to mention, Kurt, the fact that, listen, you and I used to drive down to the old KABC studios in Culver City, California, back when I lived in LA, and you'd have to drive past NPR to get there. The NPR studio was palatial. It was one of the most amazing modern architectures, multi-million-dollar building. You get to the radio station, and it's like you're afraid you're going to get eaten by a drug-infested cockroach when you go to the bathroom. No offense to KABC. But that's the difference. It's not just public radio. It's like really, really expensive public radio that we keep funding. I hope people recognize the kind of high ticket price that comes along with NPR.
Look, we're subsidizing the Volvo and Chardonnay set, and I don't see why we should. Yeah. It makes no sense. And the Republicans ought to simply say, no, we're not going to fund it. The next budget comes up, it's not going to have NPR in it, and we will not pass a budget that does.
They should do it
that's
right
how
now.
The thing is, the Republicans seem unable to understand how to exercise power because we're not the party of government. They're the ones who need government. They're the party of deadbeats, losers, the shipless handout consumers, not us. Shut the government down. I don't care. Let it get shut down.
In September 2009, when James O'Keefe presented his Acorn expose at Big Government, I was working with Andrew Breitbart at the time, and within a week, Acorn was defunded. They had one standalone bill, defund Acorn. It was done. I think it was an 89-9 vote. They could do the same thing with NPR today, and I sure hope they do. All right, coming up next, Joe Biden thinks his uncle was eaten by cannibals. Of course, he wasn't, but the fact that he thinks that might be a problem. We'll get into it next. Earlier this week, Joe Biden hit the campaign trail. He got an endorsement from the U.S. steel workers in Pennsylvania, stopped by Scranton, and then told everyone that his uncle was eaten by cannibals. Watch.
Back when D-Day occurred, and on Sunday, the next day, my mother's 4 brothers all went down to the recruiting station and joined the military. Every one of them volunteered. And my uncle, they called him Ambrose, they called him Bosie. My Uncle Bosie was a hell of an athlete, they tell me, when he was a kid. And he became an Army Air Corps before the Air Force came along. He flew those single-engine planes as reconnaissance over war zones. He got shot down in New Guinea, and they never found the body because there were a lot of cannibals for real in that part of New Guinea. My son volunteered to go to.
All right, I think we've seen enough here. Let's start with you, Andy, because I'm told when you point out these little moments that Joe Biden has, that in some way we're being, anti-elderly, that we're making fun of that. You represent the Association of Mature American Citizens, AMAC. Your entire constituency are seniors and the elderly people. You should hear my dad go off on Biden. I mean, this has nothing to do with his age. It has to do with his brain doesn't function.
Absolutely. And it's sad to watch this. There isn't anybody who's watching this or anybody on this panel that doesn't know somebody or have a loved one who has suffered from dementia. This is very difficult to watch. And so there's some empathy here. Okay. But it's also very scary to see the position this guy has. He clearly doesn't have the mental capacity to do the job. Thank God he's not driving a car. If he is, I haven't seen it. Okay. I'm hoping that they're driving him around.
By the way, for the record, I think he does drive his Corvette now and again just to go in and out of the garage where all the classified documents are stored. Right. Chris, needless to say, his uncle was not eaten by cannibals. In fact, his uncle went down in a plane over the Pacific, not over New Guinea. It was off the shore of New Guinea. But that shouldn't even matter at this point, should it? I mean, it's like he lies with abandon. And I don't know if you saw this. The Associated Press said he got some of the facts wrong on this one. Not he lied. Where are all the fact checkers that we used to know and love?
He told the story again while he was in Pennsylvania. He did it twice. And then Karine Jean-Pierre, I call her Pepe Le Pew, the White House press secretary, had to somehow explain it away, and she really couldn't. So she just talked about his love for veterans and whatnot. And I was also doing the math. I mean, I don't know how old a guy he is. What is it, 82 or something? It doesn't feel like he's that far off from having participated in D-Day physically himself, Yeah.
By the way, that's another fact check. He said D-Day, but he did not mean D-Day. He meant Pearl Harbor. He meant December 7th.
Okay.
Because it doesn't make any sense that his uncles all waited until D-Day 4 years into the war before they decided to sign up. So,
and by the way, can we talk about the people behind him that all look like they're held hostage?
They were. The union bosses made them stand there.
The people that are forced to be in these photos with him when he shuffles into Wawas and stuff, they all look like they're captives. Blink twice for help.
But Kurt, there's something else about this story that actually enrages me, because I love laughing at this guy. I mean, if we can't laugh at this man, we're crying. But Kurt, you're an Army vet, and the reason he told this story, this isn't getting as much news, but he told this story so he could then pivot and retell this already thoroughly debunked story that Donald Trump referred to dead veterans from the military from World War II in a cemetery as suckers and losers. That story that he didn't want to visit World War II dead in a cemetery in France. he started that story about his uncle being eaten by cannibals to then slime Donald Trump. And this is supposed to engender support with veterans in the military. I'm guessing that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. And I mean, and keep in mind, he's not only wrong about everything you guys talked about. He said, yeah, and it happened on and go on. And the next day, a Sunday. Well, for the day he's talking about, Pearl Harbor happened on a Sunday, so the next day would have been Monday. D-Day happened on the Tuesday, so the next day would have been Wednesday. This guy can't even get the calendar right. And then he goes off on this weird Jeffrey Dahmer tangent, about how Uncle Bosie became an appetizer to some tribesman with a bone through his nose. And we're supposed to buy it, and it suddenly pivots to, and you know who hates the troops? Donald Trump. Not like me, whose son was eaten by cannibals in, Ramadi and also Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Go with him. Go with him, Democrats. Just keep up with it.
Anyway.
What, Chris?
A man whose former presidential bid was interrupted by a bout of plagiarism.
Exactly. This is who Joe Biden has been for decades. By the way, the cannibal from New Guinea, I think, is now a warlord running things in Haiti, but soon to be a peaceful migrant crossing our border in Mexico. And
welcome barbecue.
When this story hit, by the way, on our daily show here, I had mentioned, imagine being the American ambassador to New Guinea this morning. No, Mr. Prime Minister, the president doesn't think your country is full of cannibals. In fact, if you look at the Daily Mail's headline here, apparently they are very ticked off in Papua New Guinea right now. They didn't just see any white men that fell from the sky, say outraged Papua New Guinea academics, as they're lashing out at Biden's unacceptable suggestion. But, I was told, Andy, that the grown-ups were back in charge, that Joe Biden was going to make America the world love us again. And here he is offending the good. What did the people in New Guinea ever do to deserve this?
This guy's what we used to call, he's a weapon. And I have to agree with Kurt. When I see those people standing behind him at a campaign rally or some kind of statement, they all look like they've arrived there via a forced march. Nobody looks happy there.
Yeah. He also, by the way, Chris said of the U.S. Steelworkers, thank you. When I ran for the Senate in 1972, you were the first group to ever endorse me. Of course, a month and a half ago, he said the exact same thing to the UAW. This sort of thing is sort of who Joe Biden is, as we've already mentioned. But we see through it. I mean, every single time he tries it, it doesn't ever work, does it?
But you know what it is? It's 60 years of being in the Senate and a vice president that no one really paid attention to. So you could walk around and give these stupid speeches and say these same lies over and over and over to Rotary clubs and, private dinners, and nobody paid attention. Nobody cared. And he is still in this cognitive dissonance where he believes he's a senator. In fact, sometimes he slips and says, elect me to the Senate. Send me back to Congress. It's the weirdest thing. I really believe he sometimes thinks he's still a United States senator from Delaware, and he can get away with talking about corn pop and cannibals from New Guinea.
All right. One more around the horn based on this latest escapade from Joe Biden. Kurt, does he make it to Election Day as the nominee for the Democrats?
Yes, and he loses.
All right.
I have now changed my mind. I think Donald Trump is going to probably win this election as things are postured now. This guy is a desk kid, crusty, corrupt old pervert, and I think people are tired of paying $40 for 2 Big Macs, a fries, and a Diet Coke.
Andy, will Biden be the nominee for the Democrats on Election Day?
Yes, he will make it barely.
And Chris?
He will make it. But we'll have plenty to talk about, like this clip, for months to come. Yes.
I'm going to defy my friends here. I think that the only way the Democrats have a chance to win is if they get rid of Joe Biden. I think the only way they have a chance to win is if it's the incumbent, historic first black female president running against Donald Trump, Kamala Harris. And I think they're going to make that switch right around the convention.
Ooh.
but we'll leave it there. I'll be back with some final thoughts. Thank you to our roundtable on our debut show. Thank you, gentlemen. Keep it here. I've got final thoughts coming up next. And now some closing thoughts this week. Students in Utah staged a walkout from their middle school because they were sick and tired of having to deal with furries in their school. What's a furry? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. Here are the students.
So are they wearing a mask every day?
Yes. But every time they go, they're always just wearing a mask. But the principal finally stood up and banned those stuff. But they still wear them every day, and they don't get in trouble. The principal doesn't make them get in trouble. Yeah. All the principal says is just be kind, be nice, and then.
What's the point of dressing up like a furry?
I don't know. They think they're so cool that they want to get a lot of attention. I think they want attention. So people can come at them and just look at them and think that they're so cool.
Okay.
Also,
are you guys going to be in trouble for walking out of school today?
No, maybe. We might. If we go back on school grounds, we will get in trouble. Hopefully not. We're standing for our rights. We're standing for what the furries are wrong. This is wrong. They should not be doing
Do your parents know you guys are out here?
Yes.
Okay.
They attack us. If they fight us and we just kick them, we get in trouble. They attack us. They attack us and we get in trouble.
And how else do they attack you guys?
They either bite us, they scratch us, they bark at us, they pounce on us, and then they run on all fours and pounce on people.
Why are they spraying you with Febreze?
Just because we apparently have rabies. And there's a rumor that they were putting litter boxes in the girls' bathroom. They started putting litter boxes.
I heard that was just a rumor.
No, it's true.
Is this something you've seen?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can't talk or say anything to the furries or even look at them, but they can come look at us and they can say stuff to us and touch us, and they don't get in trouble, but we get in trouble.
Interesting. That sounds like a double standard to me.
Yes.
Okay, you guys stay on the sidewalk, okay?
So the furries come to school, they wear animal masks, they bite, scratch, and attack the other students. If the students kick back or try to push back, the students who aren't dressed up like animals with masks get into trouble. What's a furry? Well, a furry is an individual, a subculture, it's described, interested in anthropomorphic animal characters, like at the Disney parks or other theme parks where people dress up like animals and walk around. There's also a deviant sexual aspect to furries that I don't want to really directly connect with these middle school children, but it's there. You can search for it yourself, but I would use a private tab and clear your browser history as soon as possible. The most interesting part of this story is that a local Utah television station wanted to get to the bottom of it and spoke to a furry who is actually not in favor of the behavior these middle school furries are displaying. And so, well, you need to see this.
Thank you. This is Strudel, a member of the furry fandom. Though they've been a furry for over a decade, they have their own opinions.
It's crazy that it's escalated to this point where these kids are being so distracting to their peers that their peers want to stage a walkout, or to have, the next generation kind of muddy our name and not represent it very well. It is kind of disappointing.
Strudel believes there should be some limits.
Continue doing things you like, continue dressing up, continue making art, but maybe let's keep it outside of school hours.
As for the school, Sorensen says they have one main goal.
We want every student to feel safe when they come to school, and we want students to get along. In fact, we want adults to get along.
Okay, so the district says they've worked with some students whose dress and appearance they say might be disruptive to the school environment.
Disruptive? What's disruptive? What could possibly be disruptive? Well, now you know more about furries than you ever needed to know, other than in this school district, this was not only permitted, but it appeared to be encouraged as long as everybody just gets along. And I guess who can blame kids for wanting to wear masks at school when they were forced to wear masks against their will for a couple of years? But my favorite part of this entire story is that what you just saw is not the strangest thing that occurred this week. Can I remind you? The President of the United States thought his uncle was eaten by cannibals. That's it for today. We'll be back next time Thanks so much for watching.